Let's face it, the past few years have been an unprecedented mess. The weight of continuous, heavy issues, burnout, fatigue, confusion, stagnance. Sound familiar? What I decided to do was to have meaningful conversations with women I admire. It's the women in my life and yours that continue to thrive through whatever it is that life throws at them. I want to know, how are they doing it? How are they getting there? And how can I glean a little bit of their wisdom? This is that. And that's what she said.
Hey, Paula, thank you so much for joining me today. I guess I should say Dr. Paula. This is Paula Gosal. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Maybe tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you because you are the principal at my children's school. That was my first introduction to you. But yeah, tell me a little bit about the work that you do here in Chilliwack and who you are.
Okay, so I'll tell you where I grew up. I'll start there, and then how I came to be in Chilliwack. I was born and raised in East Vancouver to parents who immigrated from India in the early 1970s. I went to university at Simon Fraser. I'm the first child in my dad's family, the first person in my dad's family to actually go to university.
It doesn't surprise me at all to learn that Paula was smashing barriers from a very young age. My first introduction to Paula Gosal was at an information night for CMS. My oldest was heading into middle school, and I was immediately kind of super fangirling on Paula because she was so eloquent, yet so assertive. Her presence was commanding, yet she was so warm and friendly. Yeah, stay tuned. This interview is bananas good.
And we moved to Surrey when I started university, and I taught there for a few years, for 4 years, before I got married to my husband and moved to England. And yeah, so I lived in London, England for about 3 years, and we had a bit of a traditional introduction, my husband and I. So back in the olden days, that might have been called an arranged marriage.
Okay.
But it wasn't an arranged marriage. It was an introduction, and we got to choose. And it's a really lovely fairy tale story, actually.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So our families have actually known each other for over 100 years. And yeah, and so things just worked out, and it was meant to be, and we got married in 2001. My husband jokes that he always wanted to live in Canada. So he married a Canadian woman to get immigration.
In order to get to Canada.
Right? Yeah. We joke about that. That's not actually true. But so we moved back here in 2004, and the reason that we moved back is, one, that he wanted to be here, and also I got hired sight unseen for a counseling position at 80 Rundle Middle School.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're in London, England, and you get hired on to this little school in Chilliwack, BC. Had you ever been to Chilliwack?
I'd never been to Chilliwack. I think I drove by on my way to Kelowna once, but growing up in East Vancouver, it was like Abbotsford was the end of the earth, and then Chilliwack was somewhere else.
Right.
So I drove out my first day here. I did not know where Chilliwack.
Let's take a second and remind ourselves that Paula has taken this job sight unseen. She's never been to Chilliwack. She's never seen this school. She's currently living in a totally different country, just recently married to her new hubby, who just has this vision of wanting to go to Canada. I just love that fearless approach. That approach like, yep, we can do that.
Chilliwack was, and so back then I had to print off the map from the internet. I think it was MapQuest back then, and so I made it here. And my introduction to 80 Rundle and to Chilliwack was just so beautiful. I had a flat tire that I didn't know until I pulled off on the Vetter Road exit, and the counselor who I was taking over for called Ken's Tire, called BCAA, and just a warm welcome, and the kids were so sweet, and I was like, oh, this feels really good. And so I've been here for the last 18 years.
Wow, so 18 years later, you stayed at that position for quite a while, your first one.
No, I was only there for a year. It was a
Just 1 year.
temporary
Okay.
mat leave cover, and then I went to Rosedale Middle as the counselor. And then in 2006, I became vice principal at Chilliwack Secondary School. And then from there, I was there for 6 years, and those 6 years were amazing because we did a lot of great work, but I had some significant life events that happened. I had 2 babies.
Awesome. So full-time working mother. So how did you find that when you were just having your children and they were really young? How did that go?
Yeah, so my first one, I didn't know I wanted to be a vice principal. I did not know that I wanted to be anything more than a great English teacher and
Love this quote. I didn't know I wanted to be anything other than a great English teacher. It speaks to how our lives are fluid and how, something can be so obvious to us one day, but until that day arrives, it is not obvious. And I like the way that Paula just kind of allows these ebbs and flows to come in and out of her life. And she was always really good with herself at that present moment.
a good counselor. But when I got that job, I wanted that job, and I wanted to I wanted to be the best vice principal, and I wanted to not let anything deter me. So being a woman going into a secondary school, that was interesting. And I mean, at that time I was 32. I wasn't really young, but I looked younger than I was younger than some of the teachers. And so I think there was some there was a determination to make everybody know that I was qualified for this job, and this job was a priority for me. So when I had my son, within that first year of being a vice principal, I worked extra double hard to make sure that everybody knew that I was not going to push anything aside because now I was going to be a mom. And so, I think that's some of the trials that we face as women when we enter into work.
Such an interesting point, and a point that I've heard from other women as well, wanting to ensure, to prove that the baby wasn't going to impact or impede their performance at work. Not sure that I have an answer for that, but it's interesting to note that women across many different fields have this same idea of having to keep up regardless of, creating a whole other human in our bodies.
Absolutely.
And motherhood.
And I love what you said about how up until the point that you saw that job posting, you didn't necessarily even realize that that's what you wanted, but it was something about that posting that really ignited a desire in you. What did that feel like? Can you describe that a little bit?
So being new to Chilliwack, so I was only here for 2 years, I didn't, people saw me differently than I saw myself. So I came here feeling like a young spring chicken, but I guess I had some qualities and some leadership abilities that others saw in me. And I think that was really important for somebody to say, hey, you have something, go forth.
For me, this really speaks to the power and the importance of mentorship. When we are younger, or when we are, before we become enlightened, whatever phase we're at in our lives, we really depend on people to see us in a different way than we see ourselves, as Paula so eloquently says, especially those mentors who see some kind of a talent in us and in young women. Those kinds of things matter so much, and it makes my heart so happy to know that is exactly what Paula is providing to her young students at all of her schools.
And that was just a little nudge that I needed. Now, I say that I didn't think I wanted to be in that as a vice principal, but I do remember the first day at 80 Rundle saying to the vice principal there, in 2 years' time I'm going to sit in your seat. And she's like, she used a word to describe, she says, you're driven. And I was like, I don't know if I like that word because it feels not nice, but I am driven, and I've come to realize that, and it's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. And it is so great to see incredible women like Paula out there walking the walk, but also, helping girls that are coming up to understand this thing. Our own implicit biases, social conditioning that we've had, that we've carried with us for our entire lives, makes you think, oh, I'm not supposed to be like that. And it's really so powerful to get to a place in your life where you can catch that. And you can be like, oh, wait a second. No, that's a societal norm. I don't need to pay attention to that anymore.
Ooh, I love that. I love how, your passion for something really translated into action that way. And I also just want to pick up again on the fact that you're also having babies at this time, and also in your mind that you are determined to not only have this job, but do an amazing job of this job while you are being a mom. Can you talk a little bit about, I don't know, how you found that successful? What were some of the things that you were able to do to allow you to be a mom as well as a principal all at the same time?
So I am super fortunate that I have a husband who is an amazing father, and he's a lawyer. And when I got pregnant, he said, I don't really love my job, so I'll stay home and take care of the kids.
Oh, cool.
And so he created conditions where he still works, but he does it in a way that he's there for school pickups and drop-offs and any school events, and super supportive of me to reach whatever goals I want to reach. And then we also, my mother-in-law lived with us for a time, so we had a support structure within the home. My kids didn't go to daycare. They were, not that that's bad or wrong, but it's just different for us. And that's also a cultural piece as well. So we had some cultural family supports. And yeah, so that really empowered me. And I'm super fortunate. And my husband is such an amazing encourager, challenger, and cheerleader that I get to do what I want.
Love that. And I want to pick up on that cultural piece because I think there's so much to be learned from the way that, other cultures do things, and other is just a culture that isn't one's own. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So our culture, so I'm Punjabi, we are Sikh, and our culture is very rooted in family and generational support of family. So we take care of our elders take care of our kids, and it's just that cycle that continues. So when I was growing up, my dad's family was still in India, but my mom was raised by a single mother. So she had 3 children. My grandfather passed away when my mom was 3. So my grandmother was the sole care provider for my mom and her brother. She had to give away my aunt to her parents early on because just some tough decisions about having a female child. And so her parents raised her daughter. My auntie. So when my mom came here, she was a teacher in India, but when she came here, it was about putting a roof over her head and food on the table. And so both of my parents were really geared towards working hard, more than one job at a time. And so when she became pregnant, she already had 2 sons, or my older brothers, but when she was pregnant, she said to her mom, I need you. Can you come? And at that time, my grandma was with my uncle in Australia. And so my grandma came. So I was raised by my grandmother. My mom and my dad were there. They're working hard. They're hustling. They're doing what they need to do. But
An incredibly interesting and important aspect of South Asian and East Asian cultures, where the matriarchs, the grandmothers, do a lot of the mothering because mothers themselves are younger, able-bodied, they're out there working. And so this generational help is actually what's led to the evolution of grandmothering. We're going to talk about that in our conversation a little further down the road.
My grandma was there, and so with having my grandma in the home and raising us, she was able to impart the cultural pieces, the language. So I'm fluent in Punjabi, and really enabling my parents to be successful with what they needed, and for us to be taken care of in the way we needed mothering and nurturing while they were out working. And similarly for my children, their grandma provided that for them at home.
You know, as a biologist, it makes so much sense to me. The notion of grandmothering is something that, you know, humans are unique in the animal kingdom, and it is grandmothers, not grandfathers, for, you know, relatedness reasons. But, you know, it's thought that grandmothering actually did evolve, or like menopause actually evolved, because it really, we need that help. Child rearing and you know, child care are so vast in humans. So that makes a lot of sense to me that it went that way. And I know we've also talked a little about, you know, the matriarchal structure that you come from and that your culture is built on. How do you impart some of those structural components into your principalship?
So I describe myself as the mom of the school. Right?
I love that.
So I always tell the staff and the kids, actually it's a funny introduction that I do. I think it's funny. I always describe myself as the mom of the school, and whoever my vice principal is, not as the dad, but as the uncle of the school. So
the mother's helper.
Yeah. So because, you know, kids get that all mixed up sometimes. And I think that, well, what comes through is, I know now, as I reflect on my leadership and having been a school leader for 15 years, I do mother and I do nurture, and I do want actually I call our school staff a family. And often when I email parents, I'll say CMS family, because we are a family and we are in it together. And so we need the supportive structures to help each other out, and that comes from a family feeling. And my staff know I'm the mom, especially when I, you know, pull out my finger and I'm like, what are you doing? And so do the kids. And I think with your children who come to my school, they're my kids. And so I treat them better than I treat my own kids, but I also keep them on task. And call them out when they need to be, and also try to educate them about, hey, this is why you're doing what you're doing. Can we think of a different way? And so I think that mothering piece is super present in my leadership.
Yeah, it's like, it's a firm yet clear and understandable approach. You mentioned when you came out to Chilliwack that you were one of a few female principals, also one of the few women of color working in this role. Has that changed much in the last couple of decades that you've been here?
In Chilliwack, yeah, things have shifted. I think we have a few more middle secondary principals, absolutely, who are female. I think our community is growing and changing, and color is becoming a part of our structure. For myself, this understanding of who I am as a woman in leadership, and then a woman of color in leadership, this has been a profound development for me. And I'm 47 years old, and it's taken to this point in my life where I can say, oh yeah, this is who I am, and this is what I represent, and this is what I need to speak up about, because there are very few. So my doctoral study was on, or research was on women secondary principals in British Columbia, and we've only got 29% of secondary school principals who are women.
29%. I really want to spend some time unpacking this, and also, of course, talking about your incredible achievement of having just received your doctorate. We're going to take a quick break, and then we will come back to have more of this discussion. We are back, and just before the break, we started talking about your PhD dissertation work. I'm so interested in this because, as if you didn't already have a full plate, being a school principal, a mother of two, member of society, what made you decide to pursue a doctorate?
So it's something that I've always wanted to do. So when I was younger, my mom wanted me to be a doctor, and I didn't hear her. I thought she just was trying to deter me from being a teacher because she wanted me to be more, but I wasn't understanding that. And so she's really happy that I'm a teacher and a administrator, but I'd promised her, I said, one day I'll be a doctor. And so this one's for my mom, and I worked really hard to find the time. And actually, one of our assistant superintendents, Kirk Savage, was also doing wanted to pursue his doctorate studies, and he found this opportunity, and he said, hey, what do you think? I'm like, you know what, I think I can do this. And so it was perfect timing. My kids were at a place. They were, I think, 3 years ago, they were 12 and 9.
Okay. Yeah.
So they weren't
Not little babies
not
anymore.
little babies, and so conditions were just right. And then when we did all the coursework, or I did all the coursework, and then it came to choosing a topic.
How do you decide?
Yeah, so I've always been passionate about women in leadership. I started a group here in Chilliwack in 2012 for women in middle secondary school leadership, and we thrived for a couple of years, and then life got busy and other priorities took place, and so that group didn't meet as often or at all, but that was still a passion, and I think it came from my understanding of coming into school administration or principalship or vice principalship in a place where it wasn't normal, I guess, or
quite unusual.
It was unusual for a woman to be in secondary school. So, and that was not my experience growing up. I had female principals, or I had a female principal when I graduated from high school, and I worked for 3 different female principals at 4 different high schools in Chilliwack.
Oh, wow.
Or in Surrey, sorry.
In Surrey,
Yeah, and then the headmistress at the school that I worked at in London was also a woman.
Okay.
So when I came here, I'm like, oh, what?
Very female friendly.
Yes.
And then you came here and it wasn't quite as much.
Yeah, it was still friendly. It was just being I think I was one of the first at Chilliwack Secondary School. And so that questioning of why was always there, and so that passion to understand what are the conditions and why don't some of us make it, or do all those of us who want to become vice principals or principals.
Yeah, what are some of those barriers that aren't necessarily even obvious, or even barriers in our own minds sometimes.
Yeah,
that's an interesting point. Something you said is really sticking out for me. You mentioned that you're realizing what you want or what your thoughts are about a lot of these topics for almost, the first time in your life. Can you sort of talk about how this relates to, your own personal development?
Yeah, I think that through the study, I talked to 11 different secondary school principals in British Columbia, and their experiences were not dissimilar to mine.
Okay, in what ways?
Just the avenues to get to where they are, some of the barriers that they faced, in particular, being mums. Having a family and considering the different roles we play. So we play a lot of different roles. There's a work-life management piece that comes when you are a mom, a wife, a daughter, a principal, an auntie.
A mentor to all of your students?
Yes, and to your colleagues as well. So there's all these roles that you play. And then the management. So we used to say balance. There is no balance.
Yeah, right.
Right? There's a management and what you prioritize that becomes really important. So through their stories, it was I interviewed 11 principals, and their stories were so dynamic, and I resonated with a lot of their experience, and their stories were about grit and resilience and putting up with all the stuff of society, of systemic structures that we as women have to put up with. And so through that for me, was kind of, it gave me permission to look at my world in a way that I was not willing to look at it. So you know, seeing that there are structures in education, in government, in our society that are white male dominated, that's hard for me because I am not white.
Or male.
Or male. And so to be able to come to this place, and it was like it's cathartic, but even my advisor had to push me to get there because I wasn't ready, because this is not what we do. This is not what we do as children of immigrants. This is not what we do as women. I didn't have the permission before this study to call these things out. And not that I'm calling them out, maybe identifying that this is our systemic barrier. And so, yeah, that was my...
Paula really hits the nail on the head for me on this one. She has given herself permission to address the systemic barriers in place. So this is something outside of the systemic barriers that are in place, okay? Because those are in place and we know that they're there. But this is an extra step because as women, and especially as she knows, as a woman of color, she is not supposed to complain or be rude or cause any upset to the system, right? Like she's been conditioned, as we all have, I suppose, to some degree or another, to not call things out, because that's not what women do. Where women are supposed to be, you know, quiet and reserved and quite calm and polite and grateful and all of those things. And in her strength, in seeing these systemic barriers and then gathering together the strength to speak up about them, not only is she moving forward, but she's also giving other women like me, for example, and maybe some of her colleagues, the permission to do that as well. This is such a powerful thing, and it is why women in leadership, having allies with other women in leadership, is so critical.
And so I feel lighter in that I've come to this place of realization.
Wow, and really realizing what a lot of these subconscious almost barriers and how they impacted your experience. It's so empowering then to have that realization, I would imagine.
It is very empowering.
How do you see this trickling down to some of the girls at your schools or to the young women that are watching this?
You know, I think every woman and young girl has this built-in powerful greatness that just needs to be unleashed in the best possible way. And I think that we, as women who are guiding girls, can help them like tap into that and see that it doesn't need to look like what they see on social media, that it can be about their own greatness and where they find things that they can take pride in. They don't have to live up to anybody else's expectations. They can live up to their own. And then we can enable for them. My role can be to enable for them to see what those expectations of themselves are.
Yeah.
Right? Without saying, oh, I don't think you should do that, you should do this. I think that that's not what we do. We just show them the way, and down the path that they want to go.
Oh, I love that because it empowers them to make those choices or to even come to a place in their mind that they understand they're the ones making a choice. I think, it resonates with me so much what you said just about sort of having those structures in place. Even once I had graduated with my PhD, I still took orders.
Yes.
I still didn't act like I had graduated with a PhD. So that really resonates with me too. Just sort of giving yourself permission to be the empowered person that you are. So where do you see your career heading in the next few years? I mean, you've just finished this huge milestone.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself going?
That's a interesting question to ask, because I want to live to my potential and beyond that. So if I name something and it doesn't happen, then it's not
fair enough,
right? But you know, I think I'm going to reach for greatness, whatever that looks like for me. Yeah. Yeah.
And you're changing schools this coming fall.
Mm-hmm.
You're heading to Mount Slesse.
Yes.
And you mentioned to me just before we started recording that for all of your years as a administrator and teacher in Chilliwack, you haven't been on the south side yet.
I have not been on the south side.
So that should be a new adventure for you.
It will be a new adventure. I was just there this morning and they were talking about things in the community and schools and catchments. I'm like, I have no idea.
Such a fearless approach. Did you catch how she kind of chuckled there? Oh, ha ha ha, I'm going to a new school, not super familiar with the catchment, the streets, the area, all those particular details. But what she has and what she knows is what a qualified and capable leader she is. Those details will come. Of course, those details will come, those little familiar bits that you learn when you jump into a new system. But what Paula is bringing with her is her skills as an amazing leader. And yeah, just seeing her be like, yep, here I go, I'm doing my next thing. Not a note of fear in her approach at all. Just wow, just loving the skills that she brings to the table.
What this is. So yeah, so the area is new and the people will be new and I'll be new to them.
Well, the way that you just said that is so great because it just showed you're not afraid of that.
Oh,
you're
no.
like, okay, bring it. I have stuff to learn. I have things to do.
Yes.
And you're going to go and rock it.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Paula, thank you so much for coming today and for sharing some of your wisdom with me and with our viewers.
It's been great to be here. Thank you so much.
Cheers.